The night was heavy with fog as headlights carved through the deserted road. Sarah gripped the steering wheel tighter, her breath shallow and uneven. "Keep driving," she muttered, though her voice trembled. The radio sputtered into static, breaking the silence with sharp bursts. Something darted across the asphalt, wings stretched wide, taller than anything she had ever seen. "No!" Sarah gasped, jerking the wheel as the car screeched sideways. Her eyes locked with glowing orbs in the mist before they vanished. Branches snapped in the dark, closer with every sound. A shriek pierced the night, not animal, not human. Sarah froze, clutching her useless phone, as the whisper of wings rose behind her. In the town square, murmurs spread like wildfire. Sarah's voice trembled. "I saw it," Michael replied coldly. "Headlights and fog, nothing more." People shook their heads, muttering about hysteria. Children clung to their parents, their small faces pale. The sheriff waved Sarah off, scribbling half-hearted notes. But shutters closed early, and doors locked tight. Even in denial, fear haunted every corner. The dog's howl echoed, sharp and long, cutting through silence. Sarah stood in the center, alone, her truth drowning in whispers. The forest pressed in like a living wall, as Sarah stumbled through roots and mud. Her flashlight trembled with every breath. The beam caught a pair of glowing eyes between the trees. Her knees weakened as a shriek ripped through the silence, forcing her against a trunk. The light sputtered, then died. The sound of wings thundered above, shaking the branches. She pressed herself closer to the bark, praying it would protect her. Her heart pounded, every beat loud enough to betray her hiding place. At the sheriff's desk, Sarah's words spilled out desperate and fast. "It's real, I saw it." Sheriff Douglas leaned back, his tone sharp. "Stress tricks the mind." Michael smirked from the corner, arms crossed, silent but dismissive. Sarah slammed her hand on the desk, voice breaking. "Listen to me." The buzzing fluorescent lights flickered overhead, humming louder than the silence between them. The weight of denial pressed down harder than the fear itself. Authority turned its back, leaving her alone in her truth. In the diner, Sarah's spoon clattered against porcelain as Michael stirred his coffee lazily. "Headlights and fog, that's it," he said with a grin. Neon lights bled red across their booth, buzzing faintly in the silence. "You didn't hear it," Sarah whispered, eyes fixed on the window. "You didn't feel it watching." Michael chuckled, but unease twitched in his eyes. Across the counter, the waitress' hands shook as she set down a plate. A car alarm wailed outside, sudden and sharp, then cut off. Sarah's voice was almost a breath. "It doesn't want us to believe." The house felt emptier than ever, its walls heavy with memories Sarah could not silence. A framed photo on the mantel showed her brother smiling, his eyes alive with mischief. He had vanished 2 years ago on the same road she had driven last night. Her fingers brushed the frame as if touching him would bring comfort. "It's not over," she whispered to herself. Kettle hissed in the kitchen, but the sound twisted into something that reminded her of wings. She flinched, clutching the photo tighter. Every creak of the floor seemed to echo loss, and every shadow felt like an unfinished warning. That night, Sarah awoke to the sound of whispering. She followed it down the hallway where Emily stood barefoot in the dark. The child's eyes were wide, unblinking, her voice thin. "It was outside my window," Emily said, trembling. Sarah knelt, brushing her hair back. "Just a dream," she tried, but her voice cracked. Emily shook her head. "It watched me, and it knew my name." The silence that followed cut sharper than any scream. Sarah carried her back to bed, though her heart beat like a drum of dread. At breakfast, Michael leaned over the table, frustration sharp in his tone. "You're filling her head with nonsense." Sarah slammed her cup down, the sound sharp. "She saw it, Michael. You can't ignore that." Emily sat silent, staring at her cereal, fingers trembling. Michael rubbed his temples, muttering about stress and imagination. The kitchen felt colder than the morning air outside, every word turning into a wound. Emily whispered finally. It's real. Michael's face hardened, but his silence carried more doubt than his words. Sarah wandered into the bookstore where the oldest shelves sagged with forgotten lore. The keeper sat in a shadowed corner, his eyes heavy with years. His voice rasped like dry leaves as he spoke without prompting. The thing you saw has been here before. Always waiting. Sarah leaned closer, her hands shaking. What is it? The keeper smiled faintly, though it carried no warmth. Names give power. You don't want its name. She stepped back, heart racing, but his words carved deeper than any wound. If it follows you, it is already too late. Later, Sarah stood on her porch, the night pressing down heavy. Michael's words still rang in her ears, but so did Emily's trembling whisper. The woods loomed beyond the field, their shadows darker than they should have been. She whispered into the silence, I'll prove it, I'll show them. The breeze stirred, carrying with it a faint sound like feathers brushing together. The world seemed to hold its breath, listening. Her fists tightened, not from courage but from necessity. The choice had already been made. Morning broke with a brittle chill as Sarah walked toward the barn. The door hung crooked, its hinges groaning. She froze when claw marks carved deep into the wood came into view. The grooves were far too wide for any tool she knew, and their depth suggested strength beyond imagining. Michael stepped up behind her, scoffing. Rust and weather, he said, though his voice shook. Sarah pressed her palm to the marks, her hand disappearing inside the gouges. The silence of the fields weighed heavily, broken only by the wind whistling through the splintered boards. At first light, the field smelled of iron and decay. Sarah's boots sank into wet grass as she stumbled upon the carcass. The cow lay broken, its body torn open with surgical precision. Emily stood frozen several feet away, her hands covering her mouth. Don't look, Sarah whispered, trying to block her view, though the horror was already imprinted in the child's eyes. Michael cursed under his breath, his disbelief finally cracking. The morning sun rose red through the mist, as though the land itself bore witness to something it dared not name. By evening, whispers filled the town. Neighbors leaned close on porches, their words hushed but their eyes betraying fear. Sarah stood among them, desperate for acknowledgement. You've seen it too, she urged. Faces turned away. Heads shook, denial their only shield. One old man spat on the ground, muttering about devil talk. Doors shut quickly, shutters snapped closed. Sarah's chest tightened, the weight of isolation crushing. Even in shared terror, no one would stand beside her. She realized that silence was their survival, and she alone was left to carry the truth. Inside the cluttered garage, Daniel tightened his flashlight strap and grinned. If it's out there, we'll find it. Sarah shook her head. This isn't a game. His determination burned through his fear, his loyalty to her unshaken. Emily peeked around the doorway, her voice thin. Don't go. Daniel knelt, promising softly. I'll keep her safe. Sarah wanted to believe him, but shadows stirred outside, reminding her that promises were fragile against something that should not exist. That night, the town shook with a sound not meant for human ears. It began as a low hum, rising into a piercing howl that stretched across the hills. Windows rattled, dogs barked, and silence fell just as suddenly as it began. Sarah clutched Emily close, her heart racing. Michael stood at the window, pale, unable to mask his fear. It's closer, Sarah whispered, though no one answered. The howl lingered in memory, echoing through marrow and bone. It was a warning, or perhaps a promise that the shadows had already chosen their prey. The tavern smelled of smoke and secrets. Sarah pushed through the door, finding Michael hunched in the corner. His voice was low, tense, as he whispered to a stranger. The man slid a folded paper across the table, eyes darting toward the door. Sarah froze, hidden in the shadows, catching only fragments. If she keeps digging, we're all exposed, Michael muttered. The stranger's hand clenched the glass. Betrayal stung sharper than fear, each word a blade twisting inside her. She backed away, careful not to breathe too loudly, knowing truth had turned against her. The next morning, Daniel's truck sat abandoned by the roadside. The door was ajar, keys dangling from the ignition. Sarah's chest tightened as she called his name, her voice lost in the wind. She found footprints in the mud, large and heavy, circling the truck before vanishing into the trees. A broken flashlight lay half buried, its glass shattered. The air was too still, too silent, as though the world had been emptied. Sarah's throat burned as she whispered, "Daniel." But only the woods answered, their silence crueler than any scream. In the attic, dust swirled as Sarah opened the old chest. Inside lay brittle pages bound in cracked leather. Her hands shook as she read faded words written by her grandmother. The entries told of sightings, warnings, and a creature that haunted their family for generations. "Wait, it comes for bloodlanes," one line read, the ink smeared by what looked like tears. Sarah's breath caught. This was no random terror. It was tied to her, to them, to every missing name whispered in town. The curse had always been waiting, and she had inherited its shadow. That night, Sarah stood at the edge of the field, journal in hand. The wind fell silent. From the tree line, two glowing eyes opened, watching. But this time, it did not lunge. It waited, calculating. She felt its stare pierce her, not like prey, but like recognition. Her breath hitched as its head tilted, almost curious. A shadow of wings stretched across the ground, larger than any nightmare. The journal slipped from her grasp, falling into the grass. For the first time, Sarah understood. It wasn't mindless. It was choosing. Back inside, Michael's mask of confidence cracked. His hands shook as he poured whiskey, the glass rattling against the table. "It's not real," he insisted, but his voice betrayed him. Sarah's eyes burned with fury. "You knew. You've always known." His silence was louder than any denial. Emily stirred in the hallway, frightened by the voices. Michael's jaw clenched as he looked away, unable to face her. For the first time, Sarah saw not just a skeptic, but a coward unraveling. Fear had broken through his armor, and there was no turning back. The forest swallowed every sound except the crunch of boots and Sarah's pounding breath. Daniel's flashlight beam cut through branches as they moved deeper into the dark. Then came the roar, a guttural scream that rattled bone. Trees trembled as something massive pushed closer. Sarah shouted, "Run!" but Daniel planted his feet determined. The ground shook as shadows moved too fast to follow. Branches split overhead, and the red glow of eyes burned through the mist. Sarah's heart knew the chase had begun, and there would be no outrunning it. The cabin door slammed shut, rattling on its frame. Michael shoved a chair against it while Sarah dragged Emily into the corner. Daniel scanned the windows, his breath fast, hands gripping his flashlight like a weapon. A scratching sound crept across the siding, deliberate, taunting. Emily whispered, "It's here." The glass shook as a claw dragged slowly across it, shrieking against the pane. Sarah pressed her hand to Emily's back, whispering comfort she did not believe. The air inside grew heavy, waiting for the moment the walls would give. The scratching turned to pounding. Daniel spun toward the window as it shattered inward. The creature's claw lashed out, and Daniel roared, charging forward. Sarah screamed his name, but he struck with everything he had, shoving the beast back. The sound of splintering wood echoed as his body crashed against the wall. For a heartbeat, he forced it out, his defiance burning bright. Then, silence. The window hung empty, glass shattered, and Daniel was gone. The sacrifice was instant, and the absence thundered louder than the attack. Silence fell after Daniel's scream. Sarah staggered forward, breath ragged, as the door creaked. Slowly, impossibly, it swung open on its own. The creature stood framed in the threshold, taller than the ceiling, wings folding inward. Its eyes locked on Sarah's, a predator studying prey. She raised a trembling lantern, casting flickering light across its feathers, its face obscured in shadow. The world shrank to that stare, the recognition from before now undeniable. Her voice broke into a whisper. Why me? The only answer was the slow unfurling of its wings. Chaos broke in a flash. Michael lunged for the lantern, shoving Sarah aside. "It's me it wants," he shouted, though his voice cracked with fear. The lantern toppled, flames licking across the floor. Sarah scrambled for Emily as smoke thickened, coughing with panic. Michael staggered. His betrayal laid bare not sacrifice but desperation. The creature loomed, its shadow stretching across the fire. The cabin walls groaned under heat and claw alike. In the blaze, Sarah saw the truth. Survival meant loss, and trust had shattered long before the flames. Smoke still lingered in the night air as Sarah staggered across the field, her body trembling from exhaustion. Emily clung to her side, coughing, while Michael limped a few paces behind, his shirt streaked with soot and sweat. The cabin smoldered in the distance, its collapse marked by embers flickering against the horizon. Daniel was gone, swallowed by both fire and shadow, and his absence pressed against them like a wound that would never heal. Sarah whispered to herself, "We're still here," though her words carried no triumph. Survival had not freed them. It had only left them haunted. By dawn, the sheriff's office bustled with officers, their radios crackling with routine chatter. Sarah sat on a hard bench, her eyes hollow, while Michael leaned forward, head in his hands. She repeated the truth in fragments, her voice raw. "It had wings. It looked at me. It knew." Sheriff Douglas barely glanced up from his papers. "Wildfire. That's all." His words felt rehearsed, polished for reports designed to erase the night. Sarah's fists clenched. The denial was colder than the ashes still smoldering in the forest. What burned behind her eyes could never be buried by paperwork. That evening, Sarah spread the scorched remains of the journal across her kitchen table. The pages curled and blackened, but fragments of words remained. Warnings, pleas, the same cries that had echoed through her family for generations. She stared until her eyes blurred, then shoved the remnants into the fireplace. Flames consumed them, curling ink in ash. Michael muttered behind her, "We can't live with this." Sarah said nothing. Watching the fire devour the last evidence, she realized silence was the only weapon she had left. Not against the creature, but against the madness it brought. Emily sat quietly on the porch steps, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the tree line. The sun set in streaks of red, painting the woods in unnatural colors. Sarah joined her, trying to smile, but Emily did not look away. "It's not gone," the child said softly. The certainty in her voice chilled Sarah more than any scream could. She wrapped an arm around Emily, pulling her close, though comfort felt meaningless. Emily's silence afterward spoke volumes. Whatever she had seen would never fade, and childhood had been stolen in a single night. Later that night, Sarah returned to the bookstore, drawn by unanswered questions. The old keeper sat in the same chair, his eyes heavy with knowing. He spoke before she could open her mouth. "This has happened before, and it will happen again." His voice carried no malice, only inevitability. Sarah's breath caught as he continued. "Survivors think silence saves them, but silence only feeds it. Stories are the only thing that linger." She turned, leaving him in shadows, her heart leaden. His words clung to her, heavy as chains. The curse was not broken. It had only shifted. The town moved on, as though nothing had happened. By morning, streets bustled with routine. Shops opened, laughter echoed faintly, and the sheriff's report labeled the fire an accident. Yet Sarah stood at her porch, eyes fixed on the tree line. The woods swayed gently in the wind, but the shadows were too deep, stretching too far. Each creak of branches carried memory of the howl. Emily clutched her arm, whispering, "They pretend it's gone." Sarah's jaw tightened. The silence of the townsfolk was louder than screams. The world carried on, but the truth lingered, watching from the trees. That night, Sarah sat at her desk, pen trembling in hand. Her words scratched across paper, desperate and uneven. "If you're reading this," she wrote, "it means it found me." She paused, staring at the flickering lamp, her own reflection in the window staring back. She wanted to burn the pages as she had burned the journal, but some part of her knew the story must survive. She wrote until her hand cramped, recording every sound, every shadow, every scream. Outside, a branch tapped against the glass, steady as a heartbeat. Her breath caught, the pen slipping from her grip. Emily's voice floated through the hallway, soft but chilling. Sarah froze as she heard her humming a tune, one she had never taught her. The melody was broken, uneven, the same rhythm Sarah had heard in the woods, carried on wings. She approached slowly, her steps hesitant. Emily sat cross-legged on her bed, eyes unfocused, humming as if lost in trance. "Where did you learn that?" Sarah asked. Emily tilted her head, smiling faintly. "It sang it to me." The words hollowed Sarah's chest, every ounce of blood gone cold. The nightmare had not ended. It had entered their home. Later, Sarah crept to the kitchen for water, her hands trembling as she reached for the glass. The window above the sink reflected her pale face, but behind it something else waited. A handprint smeared across the outside glass, large, clawed, still dripping condensation as if freshly pressed. Her chest seized, air refusing to enter her lungs. Slowly, she leaned closer, unable to stop herself. Beyond the print, the darkness shifted. The trees beyond the window breathed, moving without wind. Her glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor, the silence swallowing even her scream. The night ended with a sound that would never fade. A howl rose from the woods, carried across rooftops and streets, rattling through every wall. Sarah clutched Emily to her chest as Michael stood frozen in the hallway, pale as death. The cry rose higher, sharper, until it fractured into something almost like laughter. Silence followed, heavier than any noise. In the distance, wings unfurled, the beat resonating through the town's bones. Sarah shut her eyes, knowing the truth at last. The curse had not stalked their family alone. The town belonged to it, and it would never leave.